Antioch, June 14th, 1098. The Crusaders are trapped within the recently captured city, besieged by a Turkish relief army. Food has run out, and starvation has set in. But just as all seems lost, a commoner has a vision guiding him to a relic from Christ's crucifixion. The discovery rallies the Crusaders, and they sally out and defeat the Turks, clearing the way to Jerusalem. But there's a twist. By the Crusade's end, the relic that lifted their spirits at Antioch will have been judged a fake, and its now dead discoverer dismissed as a fraud. Hello, welcome to Second-Hand History. To recap the First Crusade's background, Jerusalem came under Muslim rule 4 centuries earlier during the initial wave of Islamic conquest in the 7th century. Obviously, Christians weren't too happy about this, especially the Byzantines, but they were too divided and preoccupied to do much about it, and the new Muslim rulers were generally chill with Christian holy sites and pilgrims. But in the 11th century, a new group of Muslims, the Seljuk Turks, took over the region. Not only were they less tolerant of Christian pilgrims, but they also seized most of the Byzantine Empire's remaining territory in Anatolia. This prompted Byzantine Emperor Alexios Komnenos to send a letter to Pope Urban II asking for military aid, framing it as a matter of Christian solidarity. It was a little awkward since the Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox churches had recently excommunicated each other, but Urban II was embroiled in his own clash with the Holy Roman Emperor and saw an opportunity to bolster his stature. Gathering the church leadership at Clermont in 1095, he proclaimed a call to arms to retake the Holy Land, and all who took part would have their sins absolved. The impact was immense, tapping into pent-up spiritual anxiety in many Western Europeans about their salvation, especially among the arms-bearing classes. The first wave of Crusaders, mostly peasants led by freelance firebrands, succeeded in little more than ransacking Jewish and Byzantine communities on their way to the front, where the Turks promptly annihilated them. But the second, official wave of actual knights fared better. Crossing into the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum in 1097, they defeated Sultan Khalij Arslan at the Battle of Derilion and cut their way through Anatolia until they reached the Turkish-held city of Antioch, which blocked the path to their ultimate goal of Jerusalem. The Crusaders laid siege, and after several grueling months they finally captured most of the city. Only the citadel still held out. However, the Crusaders were exhausted, low on supplies, and diminished by casualties, and it was at this moment that a massive Turkish relief army descended on Antioch and laid siege. The situation went from difficult to dire for the now outnumbered Crusaders as food ran out completely. Knights ate their horses. Many poorer Crusaders simply starved. Dispirited deserters who managed to make it past the siege lines ran into approaching Byzantine reinforcements and told them that all was lost, causing the Byzantines to turn around. Then, a peasant named Peter Bartholomew supposedly had a vision of the Apostle Andrew, who told him where to find the Holy Lance, a mythical relic from Jesus Christ's very crucifixion. He relayed his vision to the Crusader leadership, who were incredulous but desperate enough to entertain anything. A crew of workers dug a hole in the Church of St. Peter, as the vision directed, and Peter Bartholomew jumped in, futzed around, and emerged with an old iron spearhead. A miracle! Many of the Crusader leaders still had their doubts. They had already seen the supposed Holy Lance already on display in Constantinople, and it was odd how no one else digging the hole but Peter could find the relic. Skeptics included Bohemond of Taranto, a Norman commander, and Bishop Adhemar of Lepuy, the papal legate. But the most powerful commander, Raymond of St. Giles, embraced it, as did the bulk of the men, so the doubters were willing to play along. After supposedly giving the Turkish commander an opportunity to surrender, more on this later, the Crusaders sallied out the gates with renewed spirits and attacked their besiegers. Their ferocity supposedly caught the Turks off guard. Many Crusaders reported seeing a ghostly army of saints and their fallen comrades slam into the Turkish flank. The relief army broke and fled, Antioch's citadel finally surrendered, and the crusade was saved. Okay, reports of divine aid aside, what actually happened? Well, just like Christian Europe, the Muslim world was heavily fragmented. Many initially saw the First Crusade as another territorial clash, not a religious or civilizational fight. The Turkish relief force was led by a man named Kerboa, the powerful governor of Mosul, but his force was less a unified army than a fractious coalition of various emirs and officials. Kerboa had no true authority over them, And in their eyes, he was as much a potential rival tomorrow as he was their leader today. A few quietly didn't even want him to win, fearing he'd gained too much power. So, the moment the fighting turned, some of them up and left, causing a domino effect until Caraboa's army had disintegrated. The Crusaders' own divisions flared in the siege's wake, and this is where Peter Bartholomew's supposed visions went from a solution to a problem. While the Crusaders were still resting in Antioch, Bishop Adhemar died of disease, and word got out of his skepticism of the Holy Lance. Conveniently, Peter had another vision in which the late bishop's spirit told him that God temporarily sent his soul to hell as punishment for doubting the relic. As the campaign pressed on, his visions grew increasingly erratic and divisive. Meanwhile, the Crusades' leadership fell into bickering without the papal legate there to act as a mediator. In particular, Raymond and Bohemond became bitter rivals. And because Raymond was Peter's main benefactor, his visions tended to back up his patron, drawing scorn from Bohemond's men. Eventually, a critical mass of Crusaders accused Peter of making his whole story up. Indignant, he agreed to subject himself to a trial by fire, in which he would walk across burning coals to prove his holiness. If God protected him during the ordeal, he was telling the truth, and if not, well, he wasn't. Amazingly, he technically managed to complete the walk, but was so badly burned that he died shortly afterwards. And with him died the Holy Lance's credibility. The Crusaders eventually moved forward and conquered Jerusalem in 1099, killing a large fraction of its population. Looking back, Christian chroniclers of the Crusades readily credited the Holy Lance with saving their forces at Antioch, and by extension the entire campaign. Even if it had turned out to be fake, it was all part of God's plan. But did the Holy Lance save them? Some modern historians are less sure about the cause and effect. There was a 2-week gap between the Lance's discovery and when the Crusaders sallied out the gate, an oddly long wait for an army supposedly filled with newfound fervor. Also, remember how I said that the Crusaders supposedly gave Caraboa a chance to surrender? That's the Catholic version. Muslim and Byzantine sources say that it was the Crusaders who wanted to surrender, offering Antioch back in exchange for safe passage. Either way, Caraboa said no, but the Crusades' leaders were operating under something more complex than blind fanaticism. But even with these newly raised questions, it would still be wrong to dismiss the Holy Lance's discovery entirely. Contemporary Christian chroniclers were adamant about its effect. Even if we attribute some of this to hindsight on their part, it's easy to imagine how, absent the fake relic's appearance, the Crusaders may have been too demoralized to even try to counterattack and instead may have capitulated. The relic, therefore, might have been less a singular turning point for the Crusaders' morale than a reprieve that lifted their spirits just enough to make it through their lowest point. But it would not reduce its impact. Whatever the case, the Holy Lance is another illustration of how perception can be just as important as reality. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments section below.
You're straying dangerously close to counterfactual history.
What? How?
Historians treat counterfactual or what-if history with a healthy dose of skepticism. While it can be useful in certain situations, it easily slides into pure speculation, and often it's just a vehicle for outlandish scenarios dressed as history.
Okay, first of all, these examples are all alternative history stories, meant for entertainment, not academic use. There's a qualitative difference between exploring how changing one detail might impact subsequent events and a full-on alternate timeline.
But even there, we must be wary. You can't just look at one what-if moment by itself. It inevitably triggers other what-if moments. Take the Siege of Antioch. Suppose there was no Holy Lance. Yes, you could imagine the Crusaders giving up, but you could also picture the Crusades' leaders ordering an attack anyway in a desperate bid to either escape or die trying. And then, does Caraboa respond the same way tactically? You see how this quickly spirals out of control.
We can't just cut speculation out of history. If we refuse to ask how things could have gone differently, we risk other problems like oversimplification or treating everything as predetermined.
That is true. Still, historians typically try to avoid the what-if framework whenever possible, only using it with extreme caution.
Counterfactuals. Can't live with them, can't live without them. Well, thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and hope to see you next time.